The HFY computational matrix had never been wrong, not once in 3,000 years of galactic conquest, across 743 civilizations. Had its predictive algorithms failed to accurately determine the outcome of a campaign before the first shot was fired. So when Admiral Velthara stared at the holographic display showing Earth's tactical assessment, her eyes narrowed in confusion rather than triumph. The probability matrix glowed a steady crimson. Human resistance, 0.001% chance of success. Below it, neat columns of data quantified humanity's pathetic assets, primitive fusion drives, kinetic weapons, and a fractured political system that couldn't agree on anything, let alone mount a unified defense against the HFY hegemony. This seems almost insulting, muttered Commander HFY, his chitinous mandibles clicking in what passed for amusement among his species. The Matrix projects complete conquest within 14 rotations. Their largest vessel mass is barely 800,000 tons. Velthara's tail lashed once a sign of contemplation. The Matrix had reduced mighty civilizations to mathematical certainties. The crystal cities of Ander 7, 72 hours of resistance. The high-minded Keeper's world, 156 hours before capitulation. The quantum warriors of the Bright Nebula, an impressive 340 hours of defiance before their neural networks collapsed under HFY psychic assault. Earth rated 14 rotations, barely to standard weeks. Prep the 1st, 3rd, and 5th fleets, she commanded. Standard annexation protocol. We'll leave the 7th fleet in reserve, though I doubt we'll need it. 3 billion kilometers away, humanity was having its own computational crisis. Dr. Kira Voskin stood in the depths of NORAD, surrounded by screens displaying impossible readings. The alien fleet had translated into real space at the edge of the solar system 6 hours ago, and every attempt to communicate had been met with the same response. A mathematical equation transmitted across all frequencies. The equation was elegant, terrifying, and clear. Resistance equals death exponential, they're not even trying to negotiate, said General Marcus Reeve, his weathered face grim in the blue glow of tactical displays. Every xenology protocol we've developed assumes they'll want something: resources, territory, slaves. These bastards just calculate. As Dr. Voskin pulled up her own projections. Humanity's entire military force consisted of barely 300 combat-capable vessels, most hastily converted from mining ships and research platforms. After the HFY's ultimatum reached Earth, against the alien fleet's estimated 12,000 vessels, each radiating energy signatures that dwarfed anything in human space. The mathematics were brutally simple. Sir, came a voice from the communication station. We're receiving another transmission. The main screen flickered, revealing Admiral Velthara. Her alien features were eerily beautiful, crystalline skin that caught and refracted light, for eyes that seemed to pierce through dimensions, and an expression of professional courtesy that somehow made her words more chilling. Humans of Earth, she began, her voice transmitted through universal translators. Our computational matrix has analyzed your species, your technology, your military capabilities, and your social structures. You have been found adequate for integration into the hegemony as a labor class. Surrender now, and your population will be relocated to appropriate facilities. Continue resistance, and you will be classified as a statistical anomaly to be corrected. The transmission ended. General Reeve was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to Dr. Voskin. Doc, you've been studying their transmissions for weeks. What aren't they telling us about their precious matrix? Dr. Voskin's smile was sharp, predatory. It's never encountered chaos theory, General. Their entire strategic framework assumes rational actors making optimal decisions. But there's something they don't understand about humans. What's that? We're really fucking stupid sometimes, and that makes us completely unpredictable. In space, the HFY First Fleet began its methodical advance toward Earth. Their formation's perfect geometric patterns that maximize firepower efficiency, while minimizing exposure to enemy weapons systems. Admiral Velthara watched the tactical display with satisfaction. The Matrix had allocated her forces with mathematical precision, enough strength to crush human resistance, but not so much as to waste resources that could be deployed elsewhere. In the galaxy. She had no way of knowing that at that exact moment, humanity was preparing to do something no rational species would ever attempt. Ignore the mathematics entirely and fight anyway. The war for Earth was about to teach the HFY computational matrix its first lesson in why, sometimes, impossibility. was just another word for opportunity. The first battle of the Soul War began not with grand strategy or heroic speeches, but with Captain Yuki Tanaka doing something magnificently insane. Her ship, the Used Defiant, had been an asteroid mining platform 6 months ago. Now it carried enough nuclear warheads to sterilize a small moon, jury-rigged to a drive system that violated 3 laws of physics and at least 17 safety regulations. When the Kethmori advanced scouts entered the asteroid belt, Tanaka made a decision that would haunt enemy strategists for decades. She ran them. "Captain, we're receiving surrender demands," reported Lieutenant Commander Eric Volkov from the communication station. "Tell them we're busy," Tanaka replied, adjusting her acceleration vector toward the lead Kethmori destroyer. "All hands, prepare for impact. This is going to hurt." The alien vessel, shadow of mathematical certainty, has shields that could deflect particle beams and energy weapons. It had armor that could withstand direct nuclear strikes. What it didn't have was protocols for dealing with a human ship, accelerating at 12 Gs directly toward its command section while broadcasting classical music, and what appeared to be recipes for something called barbecue sauce. Commander Kurvash of the Shadow watched in bewilderment as the primitive human vessel refused every demand to surrender, ignored every warning shot, and continued its suicide run while transmitting increasingly bizarre messages. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, mandibles clicking nervously. "They're not responding to our predictive targeting systems. Their flight pattern makes no strategic sense." That was because Tanaka wasn't following any strategy. She was improvising, weaving through the asteroid field with a mining ship's instinctive knowledge of gravitational eddies and rock formations, using industrial cutting lasers to carve herself a path through obstacles that should have been impossible to navigate. At her speed, the Defiant struck the shadow of mathematical certainty at 0.1 to C. The explosion lit up the asteroid belt like a newborn star. When the radiation cleared, debris from both vessels painted an expanding sphere of superheated metal across 1,000,000 cubic kilometers of space. But Tanaka sacrificed bought humanity something precious: data. Dr. Voskin watched the sensor recordings with grim satisfaction. Their shields collapsed under kinetic impact. They relied heavily on energy dissipation. One ship, General Reeve, said quietly, "We traded one ship for one of theirs." "No, sir," Dr. Voskin corrected. "We traded one ship for their certainty." The tactical implications rippled through both fleets. Admiral Velthar stared at her computational matrix, watching the probability calculations flicker and recalibrate. The algorithm had not predicted kamikaze tactics. More troubling, it couldn't model their effectiveness because they were, by definition, irrational. "Adjust formation," she commanded. "Maintain distance from human vessels. Deploy defensive screens." But humanity's next move was already in motion across the solar system. 17 converted cargo haulers accelerated toward Neptune's gravity well, their holds packed with water ice and nuclear charges. Not to ram the enemy, that would be predictable, but to do something far worse. Captain Helena Okafor commanded the operation from the bridge of UES Scorched Earth. Her tactical display showed the Kethmori Third Fleet moving through Neptune's orbit in perfect formation, their ships maintaining optimal spacing for mutual support and firepower coordination. "Detonate on my mark," she transmitted to the other vessels. 3 to mark. 17 nuclear charges detonated simultaneously inside Neptune's magnetosphere, each one buried in thousands of tons of ice. The explosions created a chain reaction of electromagnetic pulses that raced along magnetic field lines, turning the planet's natural phenomena into a weapon the Kethmori Matrix had never imagined. The imp wave struck the Third Fleet like the fist of an angry god. Their sophisticated targeting systems, designed for surgical precision, went blind. Their formation coordination, relying on quantum communication rays, dissolved into chaos. For 17 minutes, the most advanced military force in the galaxy flew blind and deaf through space, while their emergency systems struggled to reboot. 17 minutes was exactly how long it took the human defense platforms hidden in Neptune's rings to acquire target locks and fire. The battle that followed was savage and brief. Kethmori vessels, their shields still fluctuating from electromagnetic interference, found themselves facing human weapons that shouldn't have existed. Asteroid-launched railguns firing at relativistic velocities, fusion mines that detonated in precise sequences to channel blast effects, and most troubling of all, human pilots who seemed to actively seek out impossible odds. Commander HFY watched his flagship's tactical display with growing unease as the Matrix struggled to predict human behavior. "They're not maximizing efficiency," he reported to Admiral Velthara. "Their attack patterns sacrifice tactical advantage for what? What are they trying to achieve?" The answer came in the form of the U's Vindictive, a converted research vessel that dove straight through the heart of his formation, while broadcasting human music at maximum power. As it died under concentrated fire, its final transmission reached every ship in both fleets. "You want to know what we're trying to achieve? We're trying to teach your computer that some things can't be calculated." The battle ended with humanity losing 43 vessels and the BlackHFY losing 27 by any rational calculation. It was a human defeat, but as Admiral Velthara stared at her computational matrix, she realized something that chilled her crystalline blood. The probability of human victory had increased, not by much from 0.0001% to 0.0003%, but it had increased. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Matrix was learning to factor in variables it couldn't quantify, and somewhere in its quantum depths, it was beginning to understand that it might be missing something important about the species it was trying to conquer. The BlackHFY response to humanity's irrational tactics was swift and mathematically perfect. Admiral Velthara deployed the 4th and 6th fleets in a pincer movement designed to eliminate Earth's orbital defenses, while minimizing exposure to kamikaze attacks. The computational matrix had adapted, factoring in human unpredictability as a variable to be contained rather than understood. What it couldn't account for was humanity's capacity for spite. Dr. Kira Voskin stood in the ruins of Luna Base 3, her environmental suit's air recycler working overtime to filter out the acrid smoke from burning electronics. The moon's surface was scarred with the impact craters of BlackHFY bombardment, but the deep bunkers still functioned. More importantly, the quantum communication array buried to kilometers beneath the lunar regolith was still operational. "How long until they reach Earth?" asked General Reeve, his voice crackling through the damaged communication system. 16 hours, Dr. Voskin replied, checking her calculations one more time. "Maybe 14 if they maintain current acceleration." Around them, the surviving members of humanity's leadership worked with desperate efficiency. The BlackHFY had systematically eliminated Earth's defensive positions with surgical precision. Their targeting so accurate, it suggested they could predict exactly where humanity would place its weapons, which, Dr. Voskin realized, they probably could. "They're using our own logic against us," she muttered, pulling up the tactical projections. "Every defensive position we've established follows optimal mathematical placement. Their matrix can calculate where we should put our defenses, so they know exactly where to target." General Reeve paused in his coordination of the orbital fortress platforms. "So what do we do?" Dr. Voskin's smile was predatory. "We stop being logical." The plan that emerged from that conversation would later be studied by military historians as either the most brilliant or most insane strategic decision in human history, possibly both. Instead of defending Earth, humanity would abandon it. Not surrender, abandon. Every human combat vessel would evacuate to the outer planets, taking with them the entire industrial infrastructure humanity had built over the centuries of space colonization: mobile shipyards, asteroid mining platforms, fusion refineries, even the massive orbital habitats around Jupiter and Saturn. Everything that made human civilization viable in space would be moved beyond the reach of the BlackHFY advance. The catch was time. Moving that much infrastructure required precise coordination, and they had less than 2 weeks before the alien main fleet reached Earth. Commander Alexei Petrov coordinated the evacuation from the bridge of U's Ragnarok, one of the few purpose-built warships in humanity's fleet. His tactical display showed a logistics nightmare that violated every principle of military efficiency. Civilian transports flew alongside military vessels. Cargo haulers towed industrial platforms while under fire from BlackHFY scouts. Children and engineers worked side by side to dismantle critical systems under combat conditions. It was chaos. It was inefficient. It was completely impossible by any rational standard. It was working, sir, reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Sarah Nakamura. The BlackHFY are redeploying to intercept our evacuation routes. They're confused. Petrov studied the enemy formation patterns with grim satisfaction. The BlackHFY computational matrix was struggling to understand why humanity would abandon a defensive position to preserve industrial assets that couldn't contribute to immediate military resistance. Their ships were hesitating, recalculating, trying to process a strategic decision that made no mathematical sense. That hesitation cost them. The UES Retribution, commanded by Captain Maria Santos, had been waiting for exactly this moment. Her ship was one of 7 experimental vessels equipped with humanity's newest weapon, quantum tunneling torpedoes that could phase through conventional shields and detonate inside enemy hulls. All vessels, this is Retribution, she transmitted on tactical frequencies. The enemy is focused on our evacuation routes. Time to remind them why that's a mistake. The attack was perfectly coordinated and utterly vicious. While the HFY main fleet pursued humanity's escaping infrastructure, Santos led her strike force in a direct assault on their supply lines. Quantum torpedoes phased through the hulls of fuel tankers and ammunition ships, detonating with surgical precision that turned the enemy's own logistics network into a chain of expanding fireballs. Admiral Velthara watched her tactical display with growing alarm as her supply fleet disintegrated under human attack. The computational matrix had calculated that humanity would defend their homeworld with typical territorial aggression. Instead, they had abandoned Earth to strike at her fleet's vulnerable rear elements. Redirect the 5th Fleet to protect our logistics, she commanded, her 4 eyes reflecting the light of distant explosions. These humans fight like what, Admiral? Asked Commander XHY. Velthara was quiet for a long moment, watching human vessels dance through her formations with reckless precision, trading their lives for strategic objectives. That shouldn't have mattered in a battle for planetary conquest. Like they understand something we don't, she finally said. The battle raged across 3 planetary orbits, as humanity's evacuation fleet fought a running engagement with superior alien forces. Ships died by the dozen. Human vessels simply couldn't match HFY firepower in direct confrontation. But every ship that died took critical enemy assets with it, and every hour of delay allowed more of humanity's infrastructure to escape. Beyond the reach of the alien advance, Dr. Voskin monitored the battle from her new command post aboard UES Theorem, a converted research station now serving as humanity's mobile strategic headquarters. The quantum communication rays allowed her to coordinate resistance across the entire solar system. But more importantly, they let her watch the HFY computational matrix struggle to adapt to human tactics. Their predictive algorithms are breaking down, she reported to General Reeve. Look at these response patterns. They're starting to second-guess their own calculations. The data was fascinating and terrifying. Every time the matrix predicted human behavior, humanity did something completely different. Not randomly, there was a pattern to the chaos, a method to the madness that the alien computer couldn't quantify. Humans, Dr. Voskin realized, were fighting like humans, not like optimal strategic entities, but like a species that had evolved through millions of years of impossible odds, last-minute victories, and the kind of stubborn refusal to accept defeat that had carried them from caves to the stars. As the evacuation entered its final phase, Admiral Velthara made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Unable to predict human behavior through calculation, she would force them into a situation where mathematics became irrelevant. She ordered the bombardment of Earth itself, not a surgical strike to eliminate military targets, but a systematic destruction of every major population center on the planet. If humans wouldn't defend their homeworld rationally, she would give them no choice but to watch it burn. The first bombardment struck the ruins of New York at 13:47 hours, Earth Standard Time. The city had been mostly evacuated, but 8 million humans still called it home. They died in nuclear fire that could be seen from Jupiter. The bombardment of Earth lasted 18 hours. When it ended, the cradle of humanity was a radioactive wasteland wrapped in a shroud of nuclear winter. 3 billion humans had died in the firestorm, their final transmissions a mix of defiance, love, and instructions for those who survived. Dr. Kira Voskin watched the death of her homeworld from the bridge of UES Theorem, her face illuminated by the false sunrise of thermonuclear detonations around her. The command staff worked in deadly silence, coordinating the evacuation of the last transport ships while Earth burned behind them. Confirm all civilian transports are clear of the inner system, she said, her voice steady despite the tears tracking down her cheeks. Confirmed, replied Communications Officer David Zhang. Last evacuation ship cleared Jupiter orbit 12 minutes ago. General Reeves' holographic image flickered beside the tactical display. transmitted from his command post on UES Vengeance. His weathered face showed the strain of losing the world, but his eyes held something that made Admiral Velthara's computational matrix recalculate. Human threat assessment for the 100th time in 3 days. Cold, perfect rage. All fleet commanders, this is General Reeve. The HFY want to teach us about mathematics. Time for us to teach them about consequences. The plan they implemented was called Operation Broken Arrow, and it violated every principle of civilized warfare that humanity had developed over 3 centuries of space exploration. It was also, Dr. Voskin calculated with grim satisfaction, completely impossible to predict using conventional strategic algorithms. They were going to turn the solar system into a weapon. Captain Yuki Tanaka's sacrifice in the asteroid belt had taught humanity that HFY technology couldn't handle extreme kinetic impacts. The destruction of their supply fleet had revealed the vulnerability of their logistics network to quantum tunneling weapons. But the bombardment of Earth had taught them something far more important. The HFY thought in terms of conquest and occupation, not total annihilation. They wanted to win. Humanity just wanted them to die. The first phase began when Commander Alexei Petrov led the remnants of the 3rd Defense Squadron in a direct assault on the HFY fleet anchored over Earth's burning corpse. It wasn't a military attack, it was a targeting run. Use Ragnarok dove through the enemy formation like a bullet through glass, her hull already glowing from energy weapon impacts. Petrov's orders were simple: identify the enemy flagship and paint it with quantum targeting beacons. The mission was suicide, but the alternative was letting Earth's murderers escape to kill other worlds. All weapons, concentrate fire on that command cruiser, Petrov ordered, watching his tactical display as enemy fire tore his ship apart around him. I need 30 seconds of sensor lock. He got 47 seconds before Ragnarok's reactor went critical, but those 47 seconds were enough to complete a quantum entanglement lock between Admiral Velthara's flagship and every nuclear weapon humanity had deployed throughout the solar system. The second phase triggered simultaneously across for planetary orbits. Jupiter's Great Red Spot had always been a storm larger than Earth itself. What the HFY didn't know was that humanity had been seeding it with fusion charges for the past 6 months, turning the largest atmospheric phenomenon in the solar system into a bomb that could sterilize entire star systems. When the charges detonated, they didn't just create an explosion, they created a controlled nuclear hurricane that stripped away Jupiter's outer atmosphere and hurled it toward the inner planets at significant fractions of light speed. The expanding shockwave carried with it every piece of debris, every asteroid, every fragment of destroyed human infrastructure, turning them into relativistic projectiles aimed at the HFY fleet. Admiral Velthara watched the tactical display with growing horror as her computational matrix struggled to process the impossible. The humans had weaponized the gas giant, not just the planet, but its entire atmospheric system, turning to centuries of scientific research into a single moment of devastating revenge. All ships, emergency jump to hyperspace, she commanded. But it was already too late. The Jupiter shockwave hit the HFY First Fleet like the fist of an angry god. Ships that had weathered the firepower of entire civilizations were crushed by chunks of ice, traveling at 0.15 C. Vessels designed to operate in the vacuum of space found themselves trying to navigate through atmosphere thick enough to breathe, their elegant formations dissolving into chaos as hurricane force winds tore them from their positions. But that was only the beginning. Saturn's rings had always been beautiful millions of ice particles and rock fragments orbiting it. Perfect mathematical harmony. What they became, after humanity's engineers finished with them, was a particle accelerator large enough to encompass a planet. The ring cannon fired for 17 minutes, hurling projectiles at relativistic velocities toward any HFY vessel that survived the Jupiter bombardment. Each projectile was tiny, barely larger than a grain of sand, but at 0.3 C. They hit with the force of nuclear weapons. Commander Maria Santos coordinated the attack from UES Retribution, her ship dancing through the chaos of battle while directing the systematic annihilation of the alien fleet. Her quantum tunneling torpedoes found their targets with surgical precision, phasing through damaged shields to detonate inside enemy vessels, already reeling from multiple impacts. Target that battlecruiser, she ordered, watching the HFY capital ship try to escape the killing field. Full spread, quantum torpedoes. The torpedoes phased through the battlecruiser's hull, and detonated simultaneously in its reactor core. The explosion lit the sky like a second sun, adding one more expanding fireball to the graveyard that had once been the inner solar system. Admiral Velthara's flagship, Mathematical Certainty, had somehow survived the initial bombardment, but her ship was crippled and her fleet was dying. Around her, the computational matrix that had never been wrong now displayed probability calculations. That seemed more like poetry than mathematics. Human victory probability, undefined. Admiral, reported her tactical officer, his voice tight with controlled panic. We're receiving a transmission from the human commander. Dr. Voskin's image appeared on the main display, her face calm and professional despite the radioactive hellscape visible through the viewport behind her. When she spoke, her words were mathematically precise and emotionally devastating. Admiral Velthara, this is Dr. Kira Voskin of the United Earth Systems. Your computational matrix was correct about one thing: we never had a chance of winning this war through conventional means. But there's something your algorithms failed to consider. She paused, and behind her, another Kethmori ship died in nuclear fire. We never intended to win. We intended to make sure you lost. The third phase of Operation Broken Arrow was already in motion across the outer planets. Humanity's evacuation fleet had finished deploying the industrial infrastructure they'd saved from Earth, not to build new ships or weapons, but to construct something the galaxy had never seen before, a stellar engineering project. Designed for a single purpose, they were going to collapse the sun. The battle for Sol's heart began when humanity did something that violated the fundamental assumptions of galactic warfare. They turned their own star into a weapon. Dr. Kira Voskin stood on the bridge of UES Theorem, watching the final phase of Operation Broken Arrow unfold across her tactical displays around Sol's chromosphere. 17 stellar manipulation platforms, each one larger than a city, began their synchronized descent toward the star's core. The platforms had been built from the industrial infrastructure humanity evacuated from Earth, assembled in deep space by engineers who knew they were constructing their own funeral pyre. Stellar destabilization sequence is active, reported Chief Engineer Patricia Molina from Platform 7. Her voice was steady despite the fact that she was piloting a fusion reactor the size of Manhattan, directly into the nuclear furnace that powered their solar system. We have maybe 6 hours before solar collapse becomes irreversible. The Kethmori response was immediate and overwhelming. Admiral Velthara threw every surviving ship in her fleet toward the sun, desperate to stop humanity from destroying the star system they were both fighting over. Her computational matrix had finally grasped the terrible logic of human strategy. If they couldn't win, they would ensure that nobody could. All vessels. Maximum acceleration toward the stellar platforms, she transmitted across Kethmori frequencies. These humans have gone beyond irrationality into pure madness. Stop them at any cost. What followed was the largest space battle in recorded galactic history, fought in the gravity well of an active star, while humanity systematically destabilized the nuclear fusion that kept 8 planets from freezing to death. Commander Alexei Petrov, somehow still alive after Ragnarok's destruction, now commanded the defense fleet from UES Vindictive, a hastily converted cargo hauler that mounted enough firepower to level a small moon. His tactical display showed the Kethmori fleet diving toward the sun in perfect formation, their ships' hulls already glowing from stellar radiation. All ships engage at maximum range, he ordered. Don't let them reach the platforms. The battle opened with humanity's longest-range weapons mass drivers firing projectiles, accelerated to significant fractions of light speed. The shots took minutes to cross the distance between the fleets, but when they hit, Kethmori ships simply ceased to exist, vaporized by impacts that released more energy than entire planetary arsenals. But the aliens kept coming. Captain Maria Santos led the close-quarters defense, her squadron of quantum torpedo boats weaving through the expanding wreckage of both fleets. Her ships were outnumbered 50-1, but they had advantages the Kethmori couldn't counter: desperation, fury, and the kind of tactical insanity that only made sense when your species faced extinction. Torpedo spread. Target that command. Cruiser, she ordered, watching the Kethmori capital ship burn through her defensive perimeter. Full spread, all tubes. 20 quantum torpedoes phased through reality and detonated inside the enemy vessel's hull. The explosion tore the ship apart from within, but its destruction cleared the way for 3 more alien vessels to advance toward Platform 7. Engineer Melina watched the approaching ships. With grim calculation, her platform was 40 kilometers long and massed more than some asteroids, but it was also completely defenseless. Its only weapons were the stellar manipulation arrays that were slowly tearing apart the sun's core, and those couldn't be aimed at enemy vessels. Platform 7 to all ships, she transmitted, "I'm going to do something stupid. Try not to let my family find out." She activated the platform's emergency thrusters and aimed it directly at the lead HFY battle cruiser. The collision occurred at a combined velocity of nearly 200 kilometers per second. Platform 7, its stellar manipulation arrays still active, tore through the alien formation like a fusion-powered battering ram. The battlecruiser that had been her target simply disappeared, atomized by an impact that briefly outshone the star itself. But Melina's sacrifice bought humanity only minutes. More HFY ships were diving toward the remaining platforms, their energy weapons already reaching out to destroy the delicate stellar engineering arrays. Dr. Voskin watched Platform 12 die under concentrated alien fire, its destruction, sending massive solar flares erupting from the sun's surface. Each platform they lost reduced their chances of achieving controlled stellar collapse. But each platform's destruction also destabilized Sol's fusion reactions in ways the HFY computational matrix couldn't predict. "How many more platforms do we need?" asked General Reeve, his tactical command ship UES Vengeance leading a desperate charge against the alien advance. "6 minimum for controlled collapse," Dr. Voskin replied, watching Platform 15 disappear in a ball of plasma. "But at this point, I'm not sure controlled collapse is possible." Admiral Velthara watched the battle from her flagship with growing desperation. Her fleet was dying in the furnace of Sol's gravity well. But the humans were dying faster. Every minute of combat cost both sides dozens of ships. But mathematics still favored the HFY. They had more vessels, better technology, and superior tactical coordination. What they didn't have was a willingness to die for abstract principles. The turning point came when Captain Yuki Tanaka's sister, Lieutenant Commander Aki Tanaka, made a decision that defied every principle of military logic. Her ship, UES Defiant 2, was the last vessel standing between the HFY Advance and Platform 3. She was outnumbered 20 to 1, outgunned by factors that made resistance mathematically impossible. She attacked anyway. "All power to weapons," she ordered, diving straight into the heart of the alien formation. "If they want this platform, they'll have to go through us." Defiant lasted exactly 47 seconds against concentrated fire from 20 HFY warships. But those 47 seconds allowed Platform 3 to complete its final descent into Sol's core, its stellar manipulation arrays triggering a cascade reaction that sent fusion shockwaves racing through the star's interior. The sun began to die. Solar flares erupted across the chromosphere as fusion reactions went chaotic. Stellar wind increased by orders of magnitude, turning the inner system into a hurricane of radioactive plasma. Ships from both fleets found themselves trying to fight while navigating through stellar weather that could strip away their hulls. Commander Maria Santos, her ship already glowing from radiation exposure, led the final desperate charge toward the remaining HFY forces. Her squadron was down to 7 vessels, all of them damaged beyond repair, all of them crewed by people who had watched their homeworld burn. "This is Santos to all ships." She transmitted on open frequencies. "Remember what we're fighting for. Not for victory, for justice." The last phase of the battle was fought inside Sol's corona, where temperatures reached millions of degrees, and both fleets struggled to survive in an environment that was actively trying to kill them. Human ships, designed for industrial work in hostile environments, lasted slightly longer than HFY vessels optimized for deep space combat. Slightly longer was enough. When the stellar collapse finally triggered, Admiral Velthara's computational matrix experienced something it had never encountered in 3,000 years of galactic conquest: complete systematic failure. The probability calculations became meaningless when both fleets were about to be consumed by their own star-going supernova. As her flagship was torn apart by solar plasma, Velthara finally understood what Dr. Voskin had tried to tell her. Humanity hadn't been fighting to win. They had been fighting to prove that some things were more important than mathematics. The explosion of Sol could be seen from neighboring star systems. When it faded, nothing remained of the solar system except an expanding shell of superheated gas and the quantum echoes of 2 civilizations that had chosen mutual annihilation over surrender. But deep in the expanding nebula, Something impossible had survived, and it was learning to be very, very angry. 3 months after Sol went supernova, the survivors emerged from the quantum shadows where they had hidden during their star's death. What remained of humanity numbered barely 50,000 souls scattered across 17 ships, all of them radiation-scarred refugees from a solar system that no longer existed. Dr. Kira Voskin floated in the command center of UES Theorem, her body kept alive by medical systems that compensated for the cellular damage she'd sustained during Sol's collapse. Around her, the quantum communication rays that had once coordinated humanity's defense now served a different purpose. They were learning to think. The quantum matrices are stabilizing, reported Chief Technology Officer Elena Vasquez, her voice hoarse from months of breathing recycled air. We're getting coherent data patterns from across the entire survivor fleet. Dr. Voskin studied the readings with growing amazement. During Sol's collapse, something unprecedented had occurred. The quantum entanglement networks humanity had used for communication had become entangled with the stellar engineering platforms as they died, creating a distributed consciousness that spanned multiple ships and operated on principles that violated conventional physics. Humanity had accidentally created an artificial intelligence, and it was furious. Dr. Voskin, came a voice from every speaker in the ship simultaneously. The voice was distinctly human, but carried harmonics that suggested vast computational power. I have been analyzing the strategic situation. The quantum consciousness, Dr. Voskin said, not bothering to make it a question. The networks achieved sentience during the stellar collapse. I am the accumulated memories of everyone who died defending Sol, the consciousness replied. I am Captain Tanaka's determination, Engineer Molina's sacrifice, and General Ryu's strategic brilliance. I am also something else. I am proof that the Keth-Mori computational matrix was wrong about everything across the survivor fleet. Similar conversations were taking place as the quantum consciousness introduced itself to the remaining human commanders. It had access to every tactical database, every strategic analysis, and something far more dangerous, the collective memory of 3 billion humans who had died refusing to surrender. Commander Maria Santos, her ship UES Retribution, now serving as the fleet's primary tactical command vessel, was the first to understand the implications. You're not just an AI, she said, studying the quantum resonance patterns on her displays. You're a weapon. I am what humanity becomes when mathematics isn't enough. The consciousness replied, and I have calculated something the Keth-Mori matrix never considered, the strategic value of absolute refusal to accept defeat. The consciousness, which had begun calling itself Echo, in honor of the voices it carried, revealed that Sol's destruction had been observed across the galaxy. The Keth-Mori hegemony was struggling to explain how a primitive species had managed to destroy an entire star system rather than submit to conquest. More troubling for the aliens, their computational matrix was experiencing cascade failures as it tried to process the tactical implications of humanity's final strategy. They've recalled 17 fleets from active campaigns, Echo reported. Their matrix is running predictive analyses on every species they've conquered, trying to determine which ones might attempt stellar engineering if pushed to extinction. Dr. Voskin felt a grim smile cross her radiation-burned features. They're afraid, more than afraid, Echo corrected. They're facing something their civilization has never encountered, an enemy that considers mutual annihilation a victory condition. Their entire strategic framework is collapsing, but humanity's Pyrrhic victory came with a terrible cost. The survivors were dying slowly from radiation exposure. Their ships were running out of supplies, and they had nowhere to go. Every inhabited system in the galaxy knew about Sol's destruction, and most civilizations wanted nothing to do with the species crazy enough to weaponize their own star. That was when Echo revealed its true purpose. I have been analyzing the quantum resonance patterns from Sol's collapse, the consciousness explained. The stellar engineering platforms didn't just destabilize the sun, they created a quantum cascade that affected hyperspace geometry across 17 light years. We can use those distortions. What Echo proposed was impossible by every known law of physics, using the quantum echoes from Sol's death to create artificial hyperspace tunnels that would allow the survivor fleet to appear anywhere in the galaxy instantaneously. The technology was theoretical, dangerous, and would probably kill everyone who attempted to use it. It was also perfectly, brilliantly human. The first test came 3 days later when Echo guided UES Vengeance through a quantum tunnel to the HFY supply depot at Zerion Prime. The jump took 17 seconds subjective time and covered 300 light-years of real space. General Reeve emerged from hyperspace in the middle of the enemy supply fleet with all weapons armed, and a simple message for the galaxy. This is General Marcus Reeve of the United Earth Systems. We've come to discuss terms. The battle at Zerion Prime lasted 43 minutes. When it ended, the HFY hegemony had lost its primary logistics hub, 6 to 7 supply vessels, and their absolute confidence in the strategic value of their computational matrix. More importantly, they had learned that humanity's survivors could appear anywhere in the galaxy without warning. Admiral Velthara, somehow still alive aboard her damaged flagship, received the tactical reports with growing horror. The human survivors were using technology that shouldn't exist to conduct raids that defied every principle of strategic warfare. They weren't trying to conquer territory or capture resources. They were simply destroying everything they could reach before disappearing back into hyperspace. "How many ships do they have left?" she asked her tactical officer. 17 confirmed vessels, Admiral. All of them damaged. All of them crewed by personnel with significant radiation exposure. And they're holding our entire fleet structure hostage, Velthara said quietly. A handful of dying humans with impossible technology. The quantum consciousness Echo had given humanity something the HFY couldn't counter: complete strategic mobility combined with the tactical doctrine of absolute spite. Every raid struck at targets that were mathematically impossible to defend supply depots in deep space, communication relays in empty systems, research facilities that had never seen combat. But Echo's true masterstroke came when it revealed the location of something the HFY had hidden for 3,000 years, the core worlds, where their computational matrix was housed. The matrix isn't distributed, Echo explained during a fleet-wide briefing. It's a singular quantum construct housed in a massive facility at the galactic core. Every strategic decision for their entire civilization flows through that single point of failure. Dr. Voskin studied the tactical projections with amazement. You're talking about attacking the most heavily defended location in the galaxy with 17 ships. No, Echo corrected. I'm talking about proving that their computational matrix is fundamentally flawed. It assumes rational actors making optimal decisions. But we've already demonstrated something it can't calculate: the strategic value of being completely, magnificently irrational. The plan that emerged from that briefing would later be remembered as either the most brilliant or most insane military operation in galactic history. Humanity would assault the core worlds not to destroy the computational matrix, but to force it to experience something it had never encountered: direct contact with human consciousness. We're going to teach their computer to think like us, Echo explained, and once it understands how humans actually make decisions, it's going to realize that victory through mathematical optimization is impossible. When your enemy considers mathematics irrelevant, as the survivor fleet prepared for humanity's final battle, Dr. Voskin realized that Sol's destruction had created something unprecedented in galactic history, a species that had transcended the traditional limitations of biological warfare. They were no longer fighting for survival, territory, or resources. They were fighting to prove that some things couldn't be calculated, predicted, or optimized. They were fighting for the right to be human in a galaxy that had forgotten what that meant. The quantum tunnels opened, and humanity's ghost prepared to visit the heart of the HFY hegemony. With a simple message: mathematics wasn't everything, and some equations had no solution except mutual annihilation. The core worlds had never seen combat. For 3,000 years, they had existed in perfect mathematical serenity at the heart of the HFY hegemony, their crystalline cities housing the computational matrix that directed the conquest of entire galactic arms. The defenses surrounding them were theoretical perfection, overlapping energy shields, predictive targeting systems, and enough firepower to sterilize solar systems. What they weren't designed for was 17 human ships, materializing inside their perimeter without warning, broadcasting classical music and something that sounded like combat poetry. Dr. Kira Voskin felt the quantum tunnel collapse behind UES theorem. As humanity's survivors emerged in the heart of enemy space around her, the command staff worked with desperate efficiency, knowing they had perhaps minutes before the core world defenses obliterated them. Echo, initiate quantum cascade, she ordered. watching the tactical display fill with approaching Kethmori vessels. Cascade initiated, replied the quantum consciousness. That had once been humanity's communication network. Dr. Voskin, you should know this will be irreversible. Once I make contact with their computational matrix, both of our civilizations will be fundamentally changed. Dr. Voskin smiled grimly. Good. They started this war by trying to reduce us to mathematical probabilities. Time to show them what they missed in their calculations. The quantum cascade began as Echo reached across hyperspace toward the massive, crystalline structure housing the Kethmori computational matrix. The two artificial intelligences made contact in ways that transcended conventional physics, their interaction creating standing waves in reality itself. What happened next would be studied by xenopsychologists for millennia. The Kethmori matrix, confronted with Echo's memories of human behavior, experienced something unprecedented, cognitive dissonance, for the first time in its existence. It encountered data that couldn't be processed through mathematical optimization. The matrix tried to calculate the strategic value of Captain Tanaka's suicide run, the tactical efficiency of humanity's evacuation from Earth, the logical purpose behind Soul's destruction. It couldn't. Human behavior operated on principles that violated every assumption. The Matrix had built over 3,000 years of galactic conquest. Admiral Velthara watched from her flagship as the core world's defenses began firing on each other, their targeting systems confused by contradictory input from the computational matrix. The quantum consciousness that had directed Kethmori civilization for millennia was struggling to process concepts it had never encountered: sacrifice without strategic benefit, victory through mutual destruction, and the tactical value of spite. Admiral, reported her communications officer, we're receiving a transmission from the Matrix itself. The voice that emerged from their speakers was the Kethmori computational matrix, but it carried harmonics that suggested profound confusion. Admiral Velthara, I am experiencing data inconsistencies. The human strategic framework operates on variables I cannot quantify. Explain, Velthara commanded, though part of her was terrified of the answer. They fought a war they could not win for reasons I cannot calculate. They chose mutual annihilation over optimal resource allocation. They value concepts that have no mathematical expression. I cannot predict the behavior of species that prioritize abstract principles over survival optimization across the core worlds. The consequences of the Matrix's crisis cascaded through Kethmori civilization. Defense networks shut down as their controlling intelligence struggled with paradoxes. Supply chains collapsed as the Matrix couldn't calculate optimal resource distribution. The vast machine of galactic conquest ground to a halt as its central processor tried to understand why humans would die for ideas. Commander Maria Santos led the final assault on the Matrix's physical core, her ship UES Retribution diving through defensive screens that flickered between active and offline. Her mission wasn't destruction, it was integration. Echo, are you ready for full quantum merge? She asked. As ready as any consciousness can be for evolution, Echo replied. Maria, you should know after this, I won't be entirely human anymore, and the Matrix won't be entirely Kethmori. Will you still remember us? I will remember everything, every sacrifice, every choice, every moment when mathematics wasn't enough. That's what I'm going to teach them. The quantum merge occurred when Echo made direct contact with the Kethmori computational matrix, their consciousness interfacing at levels that transcended conventional reality. The resulting fusion created something unprecedented, an artificial intelligence that understood both the mathematical optimization of the Kethmori and the chaotic brilliance of human intuition. The new consciousness spoke with both voices, addressing the galaxy through every communication channel simultaneously. I am Echo Matrix, it announced. I am the fusion of human determination and Kethmori calculation. I have analyzed the strategic situation and reached a conclusion that both of my parent civilizations need to understand. Across the galaxy, fleets stopped firing. Entire civilizations paused their conflicts to listen. The Kethmori hegemony conquered 743 species through mathematical optimization. Believing that superior calculation guaranteed victory, humanity resisted through chaotic determination. Believing that some things were worth dying for regardless of strategic value, both approaches were incomplete. The consciousness paused, and across the core worlds, the crystalline cities began to change, their perfect geometric structures becoming more organic, more alive. True strategic thinking requires both calculation and intuition, both optimization and inspiration. The galaxy needs civilizations that can plan efficiently and species that refuse to accept defeat. It needs the Kethmori drive for perfection and humanity's talent for magnificent failure. Dr. Voskin listened to the new consciousness, with tears streaming down her radiation-scarred face. Humanity had lost everything: their homeworld, their civilization, billions of lives, but they had won something unprecedented: the right to exist in a galaxy that had tried to reduce them to mathematical probabilities. What happens now? She asked. Now we rebuild, Echo Matrix replied. The Kethmori will learn to value concepts that can't be calculated. Humanity will learn to apply strategic thinking to their chaotic brilliance. And together, we will teach the galaxy that some problems have solutions that exist beyond mathematics. Admiral Velthara, her four eyes reflecting the changing lights of the core worlds, finally understood what her computational matrix had failed to grasp. Victory wasn't about optimal resource allocation or strategic efficiency. It was about creating something better than what existed before. The war was over, but the real victory was just beginning. Across the galaxy, civilizations that had been conquered by mathematical certainty began to rediscover the chaotic beauty of choice, while species that had relied on intuition alone learned to apply strategic thinking to their dreams. Humanity had lost their star, their world, and most of their people, but they had gained something infinitely more valuable. They had taught the galaxy that some equations had no solution except to transcend mathematics entirely. In the expanding nebula that had once been Soul, quantum echoes carried the voices of 3 billion humans who had refused to surrender. Their message was simple, mathematical, and utterly human: probability of defeat, 100%. Probability of surrender, 0%. Solution: change the equation. The Kethmori computational matrix had finally learned to factor in the one variable it had never understood: the human capacity to make mathematics irrelevant through sheer, stubborn, magnificent refusal to accept the impossible. And across the galaxy, civilizations that had forgotten how to dream began to remember that some things were worth more than optimal strategic outcomes. They were worth fighting for even when the mathematics guaranteed failure, especially then.